We're going to give them another minute and see if there are any stragglers. I always try to endeavor to end class on time so that if people have an obligation or after the class, I don't want people to feel embarrassed if they have to leave during the class. So it might start a minute or two late, but I'll promise to always try to end class on time. Yes, sir.
There was an accident on 440.
Ah.
And so.
Could be.
Yeah. Well, there was.
Oh, I mean, could be a reason that they could slow down. So everyone has been busy today. We've had other activities, been at work. And so to kind of bring our attention to the room, we're going to do a short meditation. How many got the handout from the 7-point meditation posture? Remember from last week? Okay. So there's a few people that do not have it, so I'll briefly go over this meditation posture. And this is there's nothing religious about this posture. It's a very practical instruction, and it's been in practice for several hundred years or a couple of thousand years. And it's okay to sit in your chair. A lot of people like to sit in the cushions. Some people like to sit in the lotus position with their legs crossed. Most people my age, many people my age aren't able to quite do that. So whatever you're comfortable with, one of the things that we don't want to do is to slouch. We don't want to, we want to sit up straight as we can, maybe sit a little forward of the chair so we're not leaning back. Most important part of the posture is to keep your spine straight. And if you can think about that as your spine is a stack of coins. And so you're just trying to arrange that stack of coins as straight as possible. You can even think, imagine that there's a string tied to your top of your head, and just kind of tug on it a little bit and kind of pull up that last little bit of straightness. And in the Tibetan tradition, we place our right hand inside our left hand. We place it in our lap. Thumbs touching. Arms a little bit away from our body. And that's just airflow. So if you've been to like a yoga class or something and taken a meditation at the end of that, you may have a different posture. So, and you're welcome to do that. But while we're in this class, consider doing this posture. This is going to be a focusing posture. Just again, we've all been at work today. We've all had other activities. And the purpose of this meditation at this time is just to bring our focus to this room and to calm down a little bit. The eyes, some people close their eyes. Sometimes closing your eyes will cause a little bit of drowsiness. If you leave your eyes partially opened, there's a little bit of light coming in, and that may help you maintain your concentration. So meditation is not zoning out. Meditation is not daydreaming. It's a very focused activity. We're using our mind to calm our mind. And so in this meditation, it's called counting the breaths. The idea is that the breath is always with you. It's a very easy object to focus on, and that's what meditation is. One inhalation and one exhalation is one. An inhalation and exhalation is 2, and so on. The idea is to try to get to 10. If there's a thought that arises during your counting your breath, it's hard to ignore it. Acknowledge the thought. Don't cling to it. Don't grasp to it. Don't judge it. Just let it pass. There's a thought. It could be about what you need to do on the way home and so on. So if you're in that posture, focus your attention on your breathing. Breathe normally. Just focus your mind on the rising and falling of your shoulders or your chest as you inhale and exhale. So allow your mind to settle and become calm and present. Try focusing your attention on the opening of your nostrils. Pay attention to the sensation as you breathe in and out through your nose. So if you become distracted, just start over. You can imagine your consciousness as a blue sky. It's clear. A cloud will come into view, pass across and disappear. And think of the cloud as a thought. Don't judge it. You bring your awareness back to the room. And welcome to Kadampa. My name is Steve. Some of you are new for tonight. Kate is new. You were, I can't remember your name, but.
My name is Karen.
Okay, how would you want to introduce the new folks and yourself as well? We have a new program assistant. We'll do a quick review after this.
Okay, my name's Hetty Hollyfield. I've been a member of the Kadampa Center since 2007, I discovered the place through a class similar to this, first a meditation class. And then way back when they had a introductory Buddhism class that lasted about 2 weeks maybe. So it was a very brief introduction. And then a family crisis brought me back here in 2006, and I've been here ever since. And it's been my spiritual home ever since that. So
Thank you.
yeah, there's several new people.
Kate, do you mind introducing? She'll get to you.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I live in Sanford, so nice to meet everyone. Yeah. And I'm here for a family crisis, too. It's brought me back. So.
Yeah, the reason the microphone's required
Thank
is
you.
because we're streaming everything online, so there's people at home that might be listening. So if you raise your hand, you need to wait for me to get to you. So.
Hi, I'm Tina, and just been looking for a little more focus, a little more clarity.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm Dean, and also looking for more clarity. We also had a little crisis last week, so it brought us back to this.
Thank you.
Good night, my name is Eloy, and it's been a really stressful semester, so I've just been looking for ways to keeping myself centered and more focused when I go to work or just during the everyday activities.
Thank you, Eloy.
Hi, I'm Gil. A neighbor told me about this place, and it sounded very interesting, so I decided to give it a try.
Welcome, Gil.
Hello, my name is Katie, and I was introduced to this place by Steve, and I'm here because I want to live a mindful life, and I'm always trying to evolve ways of discovering awareness, and thought this would be a good avenue.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie.
Hi everyone, my name is Karen, and I tried to start meditating maybe like a month ago, and I started in Mexico. I'm from Mexico, and I just wanted to continue, and I started because of a personal crisis, so
Understand.
I do want to see life in a different way.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that's new tonight that wants to?
Hi, I'm Larry Ray, and I'm here with my wife, Darlene, out of curiosity mainly about teachings and beliefs that can make the Dalai Lama such a happy guy.
And so if you new people, my name is Steve. I've been a member of Kadampa for a number of years. I found the Kadampa Center by happenstance. I was taking courses online, and Kadampa is affiliated with what's known as the FPMT, the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana tradition. And not unbeknownst to me, this center, Kadampa Center, is affiliated with the FPMT. And I was here the next day and been here ever since. Well, this is a gateway course. It's an introductory course. We have another introductory course, it's Meditation 101, where they do mostly meditation. In this course, we're going to have an overview of Buddhism, what the Buddha taught, who some of the teachers were. The Kadampa Center is a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, so there's a very engaged lineage of teachers. It's a very rich tradition, as you can see by Tibetans like to put things on the wall, and all of these things mean something. You can think of these as teaching aids and inspirations and so on, and we'll talk about some of them. But again, this is an introductory class, so it's kind of hard to go in great detail about some of these issues. Chris is our kind of like stage manager and engineer, and my very good friend. He makes all the teachings possible online and streaming as well. So last week we did a bit of an introductory to the Four Noble Truths, something about emptiness, how things exist, who the Buddha was, what his life, how he lived his life, and how he came to be such an important historical figure. And last week I talked about, and we had so many new people, I talked about Siddhartha Gautama, it was a historical Buddha, and was born in somewhere around 565, born a prince in what is now Nepal. His father was a regional king. At about age 26, he left the palace for the first time. His father had been very protective, wanting him to take over the kingdom and so on. Left the palace and for the first time and went out into the villages and saw the suffering that he had not seen before. He saw a sick person, he saw an old person, he saw a dead body, and he saw a mendicant, spiritual person, a monk. Never seen these people before, maybe the spiritual person. And he asked his attendants, he had these people that were traveling with them, well, what is this sickness? And they told him, well, if you live long enough, you're going to grow old and you're going to get sick and you're going to die. And this was a shock to Siddhartha. So after some contemplation, he left the palace and decided that he was going to seek the answer to some of these issues. He had lived this life of pleasure, and so now he cut his hair. You know, they say in Indian royalty had very long hair, beautiful robes, all his jewelry. He shunned all that, cut his hair, put on the rags of a monk, and started this life of asceticism where he's depriving himself of nourishment and to force his consciousness to enable him to examine these issues. And what's interesting to me is that, or the characterization of this endeavor on the Buddha's part, was he did not have the instruments that we have today, like telescopes and microscopes and all these scientific instruments that we use to study and learn and examine phenomena. All of that Siddhartha had was his mind. And through meditation, he calibrated his mind, he enhanced his thinking, he developed an ability to concentrate using the only instrument he had, and that was his mind. I would think anyway, that you would need a laboratory at NC State to research this sort of idea. So there was a number of years that Siddhartha, 6 or 7 years that Siddhartha was on this path of discovery with these other ascetics. He saw over a period of time that this extreme lifestyle wasn't benefiting him, and I'm trying to condense the story so we can get on to other things. But he saw this instrument player that had this string instrument, and this musician explained to the Siddhartha that if the instrument's tuned too tightly, it will not make music. If it's tuned too loosely, it will not make music. It's got to be tuned in tune and be just right. And that set him to thinking about these two extremes that he'd been living in, the extreme of luxury and this extreme of poverty. And like the instrument, maybe there was a middle way. Maybe there was another way. And so he set into meditating under what's the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya. Bodhi tree's a kind of a ficus, a type of ficus. And he said he was going to sit there and meditate until he figured this out, and he did. And what we're going to talk about over the next 4 or 5 weeks is this enlightenment, this discovery that he made. And one of the things I pointed out last week was in this tradition, it is encouraged to examine what you hear, what you read about Buddhism, what we say it's about, what we say the Buddha taught, what the Buddha says himself, to question everything, examine everything. There is nothing here that is that's shared, that's where you're asked to just believe in blind faith. Buddhism is a very active experience. It is not something to believe, it's something to do. You can think of the word, you can think of Buddhism as a verb as much as a noun. It is what to do. It is how to tune your own mind and sort these things out. Now, in light of that, you could say, and I think it's reasonable to say, well, how likely is it that someone that's 26 years old, has grown up in a palace and probably got an exceptional education, how is it that he did not see these sufferings that you're talking about? This old person, this sick person, this dead body, they probably would hide that sort of thing. And so I was thinking after class last week, how would I give a parallel description of that. So I drive by Western Wake Hospital on my way to the gym every day. And it's at Western Wake Hospital. It's at the intersection of Kildare Farm Road and Tryon Road. And so I get caught at the light there often, and I turn right to go to the gym. And at that light, I usually have my coffee, and I'm probably listening to B.B. King. And I'm not thinking about the people in that building that are suffering, that are dying, that are sick. And that's where my father died. But that's not even on my mind. And I drive by that building every day, and it didn't occur to me until after class last week that that's not unlike what I've described that Siddhartha Gautama experienced. I mean, just as an example. And I think as we travel, you know, Raleigh, North Carolina, the United States is a very wealthy country. I don't think anyone in here is suffering from a housing shortage or food like that. So many people are in other countries. But we're driving by people every day that are in pain, and we just don't see it. And we're meeting people every day where we work, where we shop, that are in pain. I mean, everybody has some story, something that they're dealing with. Everyone we meet has some crisis. Either they're just getting over it, they're dealing with it now, or it's about to happen to them. And so I don't think it's unreasonable. That story I don't think is unreasonable. And so there you go. Okay. All right. So this is the second session I'm going to do. We did our meditation. I just think this is hilarious. One of my friends posted this on Facebook. So after class last week, somebody asked me a question about these tankas, and I probably made an overbroad statement about how these are not historical figures. And one of the requirements in the outline that we're provided by FPEMT is to talk about our lineage of teachers. And that also goes to the credibility of what you're hearing here. Question what you hear, question what you see, and consider who these teachers that we have here. This is Geshe Sangpo. I just don't know what to say about it. He's such a character. He's just a nice guy. So Geshe Sangpo escaped. He's one of our teachers here, one of the resident teachers here. He's born in Tibet. He escaped Tibet across the Himalayas at age 12. Tibet was invaded by the Communist Chinese in 1950. His Holiness escaped soon thereafter, in 1959 or so. And a great number of Tibetans followed him. But Geshe Sangpo, born in Tibet, crossed the Himalayas, and they did it in the winter at night because that's when the fewest Chinese soldiers, the fewest patrols were evident. Went to Sarajay Monastery in India. He's one of the youngest people to ever earn a Geshe degree. A Geshe degree is a doctorate, equivalent of a doctorate in Buddhist divinity and philosophy. After he graduated from Sarajay, he went to the Tantric College for 2 years, and that's what these tankas are about. A lot of these images are in the part of the Vajrayana practice of Buddhism, and we'll talk about that as well. This is Geshe Gaelic, the one on the left. It's the best picture I could find. I took this picture. Everything else I found, I was going to have to download from the internet. It was really grainy, and this didn't show up very well. And this was taken at 1000 Buddha Vietnamese temple in Greensboro, and that's my wife. We were actually doing some volunteer work with Geshe. Geshe was born in India, but he entered the Sarajay Monastery at age 7, graduated with a Larampa 1997. That means with honors. So not only does he have a PhD in Tibetan divinity and philosophy, but he graduated with honors. And I'm thinking Geshe Sangpo did as well, but going through what I could find, the historical record, he graduated with honors. Geshe Gaelic was sent to the Kadampa Center by Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche are represented in the photographs on either side of His Holiness. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. He's been our teacher and spiritual friend since 1999. The center here started in a family physician's living room 25 years ago, and moved to the basement of a commercial building, and then we bought this building. But Geshe Gillick's been with us almost 20 years. He's been in Argentina the last 2 months. He taught this past Sunday for it's the first time we've seen him in 8 or 10 weeks. I can tell you some stories about Geshe, and I hope something will remind me of some of them. So this is Lama Yeshe. So I'm going from our youngest teacher to, we're going to go back in time. Lama Yeshe, so my generation was traveling in the 60s and 70s to the Far East to study Buddhism, to study meditation and so on. There were some experiments with some recreational substances that they thought would enhance their consciousness. You may have heard of people like Timothy Leary and Ram Dass. They were taking LSD and they thought experiencing nirvana, but they would come down and be back to the real world. So Ram Dass and Timothy Leary, they went to India and Kathmandu, Nepal, and all these various places to study Buddhism and meditation. Well, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche were meeting all these, what Geshe calls hippies. And so Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe started teaching Westerners in the 60s and 70s, and started opening centers in the West. There was so many Westerners were going to Asia. They were thinking, instead of all these hippies coming to Kathmandu, we should go to where the hippies are and teach them there. And that's how the FPMT got started. Now there's 160 centers like Kadampa all over the world, and most of them are in Western countries, and a lot in Australia, New Zealand, North America, South America, and Europe, with a big presence in Europe. So this is Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He is coming in May. He comes to North Carolina he's been coming every year. He was here every year for 5 years. He took a break last year. Teaches in Black Mountain, North Carolina. People all over the world come to hear him teach. Co-founder of the FPNT. He's the spiritual director of the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. And I think he's going to be here in May. Our spiritual program coordinator said that some of them were having problems with visas, and I don't know if that's because of the current political situation, but we don't have a firm date yet because we don't know about their visa situation. So, someone asked me about these tankas. I'm kind of doing a trick with you. Tenzin Gatsu Chinrinzik. This is significant to us. As I said last week, these tankas are personifications of ideals, compassion in action, some of the healing. So Chinrinzik is depicted in this tanka back here. So this is not, no, that's Buddha. Yeah, thank you. So who is Tenzin Chinrinzik? Tenzin Gatsu Chinrinzik. So His Holiness is, you see him with the yellow, he is a Geshe in the Gelug tradition. He's a Geshe in our tradition. There are 4 Tibetan Buddhist schools, Kagyu, Nyingma, Sakyu, and Gelugpa. We're Gelugpa, signified by the yellow. The monks that have not obtained the Geshe degree wear just the maroon monks. So he's the 14th Dalai Lama, so that you could infer from that there's been 13 before him, and here they are. You can probably tell I cut and pasted this from WikiLeaks this afternoon. I'm still learning PowerPoint. So this goes back, these people, these teachers, these spiritual leaders go back to the 1300s, early 1400s. Dalai Lama is clearly a spiritual leader of Tibetan people. They were the political leader of the Tibetan people from the 5th century into the mid-1990s, when His Holiness abdicated being the political leader of the Tibetan people in exile. And the Central Tibetan Authority was formed as like a parliament, a government in exile. And so he continues to be the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people and the other 3 schools of Tibetan practices. But he's not like the Tibetan Pope or anything like that. He has won the Nobel Peace Prize. He speaks all over the world for peace and compassion, but is not like the Tibetan Pope. Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa is critical to this school and this lineage of teachers. He founded the Gelug school. He instituted the lineage of the Dalai Lama. He trained the first Dalai Lama. So you will see these, anytime you see this yellow hat, these are Gelug teachers. And so he founded the Gelug tradition. The important thing about Lama Tsongkhapa was that he wrote what's called the Lamrim Chinmo. The Lamrim is a commentary on a collection of works that was written by Lama Atisha. We're going to talk about him in a minute. Lamrim Chinmo is a summation of all of the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha taught, it said, 84,000 different teachings. When the Buddha gave teachings, he would teach according to the students that came to hear him. So it was whatever their spiritual need was, that's what he taught. There was not, and it's still true in this tradition, there is no we tell you what we think you need to know, not we being a teacher, but the lamas. They want to hear what you need and they teach to that need. But what that does is you end up with thousands of these teachings. That's what these flags are. Those are the ends of books. Now these are books in Sanskrit, and they're loose pages shaped like that and just bound with a wooden cover. And that's what all these are. Geshe-la's the only one I know that can read these things. But for you and I to try to decide what to study and what to practice would be problematic if this is what we were going to use. So, oops, what happened to Lama Tisha? Well, so the Lamrim Chinmo is kind of like the Buddhism for Dummies. I mean, it is a self-help guide that gives you, or any practitioner, or any student, a gradual steps to enlightenment. That's what Lamrim means. Chinmo is commentary, great treatises on the Lamrim. He's also attributed to this 3 principal aspects of the path. Now I put this on this slide. We're not going to get to that tonight, although it is, we talked about the 4 Noble Truths, and I'm going to go over that again tonight. But that is the 4th of the 4 Noble Truths. And I don't know, I've got a slide, we'll explain that in a few minutes. We have so many new people, I'm just kind of going to redo the 4 Noble Truths. But that's what these 3 principal aspects of the path. So not only did he do the Lamrim Chinmo, the 3 principal aspects of the path is kind of like a Reader's Digest of the Lamrim. I mean, I haven't been taught to describe it that way, but it is the Buddhist path in 3 considerations. And I can tell you what they are. It's not going to go over your head right now, but it's the renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But the significance of Lama Tsongkhapa is starting the lineage of Dalai Lamas, the Lamrim, and of course founding this lineage of schools. Dalai Lama means, the word Dali is Mongolian, and it means ocean. Lama is a Tibetan word that means spiritual teacher. So the idea is it's an ocean of knowledge is the meaning for that. So Any questions about anything you see there, Chris? Next to the bottom, next to the last line. Can you see that far? Eddie?
Mass murder.
Oh, how about that? This is my guy. I so relate to this guy. So one of the purposes of going through these slides is some of the people we talk about here are actually historical figures that have had either their amazing teachers, scholars, or practitioners. And this is a man who killed all his in-laws, or I can't remember now, whether it was his side of the family. But what happened was, he was very wealthy. His father was a merchant, and his father died, and his uncle, I think it was on his father's brother, stole everything, and his aunt stole everything, and so Milarepa and his mother schemed on, and I should have the names up there. It was just PowerPoints with a whole bunch of words up there. It's not very helpful. Well, the idea or the story goes that Milarepa killed, it's like 35 people, and was in a great deal of pain over that. And he goes to this Marpa, this teacher at the bottom. Well, Marpa was not a lama. Marpa was not a monk. He was a skilled teacher, and people came from all around to learn from him. But he was a farmer, a businessman, and a family man. He had a wife and children, and so on. So Milarepa came to Marpa wanting to be taught. And I don't know if you've heard stories, like military stories, where some soldiers instructed, well, go dig a hole. And the soldier comes back to the sergeant and says, well, I dug the hole. And he says, fine, go fill it in. And they do that numerous times. And I've heard of fathers doing that to sons, or maybe not to that extreme. Well, that's what Marpa did. I mean, Marpa was trying to he knew who he was. He was a killer, mass murderer. That's my term down there, mass murderer. And over a period of time, Milarepa kept doing these ridiculous tasks that Marpa was giving him, and relented and taught him. And the significance of Milarepa is that he obtained enlightenment in one lifetime. And in our tradition, what we're taught is it takes eons. It takes eons of lifetimes, ever how long that is. It's very rare, and to obtain to develop both the mindfulness and the ability that Milarepa did in one lifetime. So his life represents the ideal bodhisattvas, and that's what a lot of these deities you see on these tankas are bodhisattvas, and it's not a historical figure. It's a representation of the altruistic wish to become enlightened to benefit other people, and that's what Mahayana Buddhism is about. It is not only self-liberation, but liberation to benefit everyone else. And it's like you have to know how to swim before you can save people that are drowning in a swimming pool. So it's just the path that to benefit other people, bodhisattvas. So, and he's an example of the interdependency of these are the three Buddhist traditions: Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Hinayana is the individual liberation. It's also known as Theravada, which is not such a secular idea, because the literal translation of Hinayana is lesser vehicle, Mahayana is greater vehicle, and Vajrayana is diamond vehicle, and that's the tantric practices. So Mahayana and Vajrayana would go together. That's a Tibetan practice. It's also like the northern countries, China, Mongolia, India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, which is a big Buddhist practice for a period of time. Theravada or Hinayana, the southern traditions, that's Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Japan, and Korea are Mahayana. A student of Milarepa, mass murderer. He's also a poet. So there's a book, it's called Songs of Milarepa, and he put the Buddhist teachings into song and in poetry. Now, it doesn't really rhyme very well in English, but it's still very pleasant to read, and we occasionally have that book here. So Atisha, we're getting to almost to the end. Buddhism was scattered in Tibet. It was established and it was scattered. There were invaders from Mongolia and other countries, and monasteries were destroyed, and teachers were killed, and so on. And I can't remember the king's name at that time, but Atisha was asked to come to Tibet and reestablish Buddhism. Atisha wrote A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Now, that's the Lam Drone, D-R-O-E-N. This was A Lamp of the Path is what Kadampa wrote, is what Lama Tsongkhapa wrote his commentaries about. So A Lamp for the Path is the Lam Drone. What Tsongkhapa wrote is the Lam Rinchen Mo. So Atisha made the first effort to put all these teachings in order. Lama Tsongkhapa just further codified them. So all of the Lam Rim commentaries that have been written since Atisha was in Tibet are all roots of the Lam Rim as the lamp for the path to enlightenment. So Lam Rim's almost like a genre, like a mystery novel is a genre. Lam Rim is a genre. Many people have written commentaries on the Lam Rim, but the Lama Tsongkhapa is the most famous one. This man, Asanga, Hetty and I are going to India in November with Geshe Songpo and others. And are you going to walk Vulture's Peak with us? So we're going to Bodh Gaya. It's like a 4-mile hike. It's 2 miles there and 2 miles back. So this is where Vulture's Peak is also called Bird Mountain. Vulture's Peak in Bodh Gaya in India is where the Buddha spent a lot of time meditating. But this Asanga has this just incredible story of these teachings that he received from Maitreya while meditating in a cave for 12 years. So it's 3 years, he would get frustrated and leave. 3 years, get frustrated and leave and come back. So, but after his 12 years, he and his brother, Vasubandhu, founded a school of Abhidharma teachings that later became the basis for the Chittamatra school. And the Chittamatra school is going to be important later on when we start talking about how things exist and what the different schools asserted. In the Chittamatra school, they asserted that things do not exist unless there's a consciousness to observe them. So it's kind of like, does a tree that falls in the woods or the forest, if no one's there to hear it, does it make sound? Well, of course it does. I mean, it's pressure waves, it hits the ground, and it's whether anyone's there to hear it or not, the physics are there. But the Chittamatra school, the Buddha taught that things don't exist inherently, that things are empty of inherent existence. They don't exist the way we think they do. They're compounded. They're parts and pieces of other things. The Chittamatra school, in examining that, debate's a big tactic in Tibetan Buddhism. The Chittamatra school, through debate, asserted that it's called Chittamatra means mind only. Chitta means mind, mind only. So it's their assertion was that unless there's a consciousness present to observe an object, the object does not exist. Now that's the extreme. So the one extreme is that things exist the way we think they do. That's the conventional truth, conventional reality. That's the labeling that we do, or this is a table. We all say this is a table. That's the conventional truth. Chittamatra school is the complete opposite. It's like nihilist. I mean, they're saying, well, nothing exists. That everything's a projection of the mind. And where we go from Chittamatra is to where we are today, and that's the Madhyamaka school, and we'll talk about that. Nagarjuna. All of the teachings of Nagarjuna would be of the Madhyamaka school. Madhyamaka means middle way. And again, so you've got this Chittamatras who say that nothing exists unless there's someone observing it. You got the other extreme where people are saying that things exist exactly the way I see them. And the Madhyamaka school says, no, there's a middle way. And we're going to talk about that. He's also credited with the two truths. And when I was preparing these slides, I had not seen this before, and I've been taught a lot about these two truths. It's the ultimate truth, conventional truth, and I did not know that that was attributed to Nagarjuna. So we get to the beginning of all this. Siddhartha Gautama, born at 566, 565, lived 80 years. That's how I came up with that. The point of all of that I just showed you was that from the two Geshis that we have that come here every Sunday, come here a couple of times a week, Geshe Gaelic is teaching 3 aspects of the past starting tomorrow night for a few weeks, can be traced all the way back to the historical Buddha. So there's an unbroken lineage between the people, the Tibetan monks that sit in this chair every Sunday. There's an unbroken lineage back to Siddhartha Gautama. And that's significant for me. I mean, this, and I know all these things when I first started coming here, but that gives a lot of credibility to what is done here, what is said here. This is, all the traditions that are practiced here are 2,000 years old and can be traced back to the way it was taught and practiced back in this time. Now, this was supposed to be notes to myself. Just a little bit. His dad was the ruler of the Sakyas clan that's now in Nepal. His mother Maya died not long after his birth. He was raised by his aunt. He married Yashodhara, had a son, Rahula, and he left them. I mean, when he left the palace to explore this, the suffering he sought, he left them in the palace. Of course, his son inherited the kingdom. So he traveled in the Ganges Valley. He studied with other teachers and practiced their systems. Obtained enlightenment at age 35 in Bodh Gaya in the Bihar state. So we're going to talk about this first sermon. The 5 aesthetics that he taught were the ones that he had traveled with earlier. It's in the deer park in Sarnath. It's just a part of the woods that deer were attracted to. And you'll see occasionally, people ask me all the time with all these symbolism, and you'll see on Geshe's throne here, you see the deers. And so this is a depiction, this is a to recreate that idea of the deer park. So we went over this last week for the people that were here before. This was the Buddha's first teaching. Everything about what you hear about Buddhism comes back to these ideas. The first, the truth of suffering, and this is what the Buddha said he saw when he left the palace. And so, as I said last week, the word that's being translated into suffering is a Sanskrit word called dukkha. Now, dukkha, suffering can be used to describe that word, but it means so many other things. It's dissatisfaction, problems, not getting what you want, getting what you don't want. Sometimes this is translated as thirst. Now, if you think about being in the desert and not having any water, I mean, how thirsty can you be, and how much pain is that? How much suffering is that? So the idea is not to get hung up on this suffering. There are 3. They describe different sufferings. Hey, would you pass these out? So I printed the handouts because people don't never go to the website and get these things. So the first noble truth of suffering, we're going to talk about these 3 types of sufferings. And there's the suffering of suffering, and that's what the suffering of pain is. Suffering of suffering. This is where you're have been wounded, you've broken bone, or you have an illness that's causing you pain. Suffering of suffering is that actual pain. And we're talking about the truth of suffering. We're talking about the different types of suffering. The suffering of change. I mean, I'm such a creature of habit. I do not like change. I don't like change. I like routines. I like doing everything the same way. You know, they tell you, you get to work and they tell you, well, you got to do it this way now. Well, I've been doing it. Well, you know what? And that's also described as, sometimes we're really warm. The environment becomes uncomfortable, and so you go out, you turn on the air conditioner, well then you get cold. So you go outside, or you turn on the heat, you turn the air conditioner on, well now you're hot. That's the suffering of change. There's many examples of change. Number 3, the pervasive compounded suffering. This is samsara. Geshe Gelik says his teacher, I think he's attributed to Lama Yeshe. He was samsara. It's a Sanskrit word, and it means cycle, to cycle. And this we will end up talking about, and if you study Buddhism for any length of time, you're going to hear this all the time. Samsara. It is the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, death, and rebirth. I should say, Chris pointed this out in a class one time, it's uncontrolled rebirth, but it's birth, old age, sickness, death. Birth, old age, sickness, and death. And that's what we are all experiencing. Samsara. Now, there's a lot of deliciousness about samsara, and that's one of the problems. I mean, we are attracted to things that give us sense pleasures. We are attracted to things that enhance our sense of self. We're attracted to things that enhance our sense of I, me, mine. Anything that feeds that sense of I, we are attracted to. Anything that disputes that or negates this sense of I, we don't like that. An example doesn't come to mind. Teddy, can you think of anything? Example of things that negate our sense of me, our sense of self? Okay. Jim? Okay. But that's what this pervasive suffering is samsara. It's just life is suffering. Life is problem. So these are the 3 sufferings that the Buddha talked about. And what he saw when he left the palace. So what he is saying, the truth is there is suffering. And these are the sufferings that he describes. The second truth is the cause. Now, you can think of these first 2 as things you don't want. The cause of suffering. This is going to be, there's a list here: ignorance, anger, attachment, pride, doubt, wrong view. But the cause of this suffering that he's describing here is our false sense of reality, our delusions, our misconception of how things exist and what gives us pleasure. I mean, what causes happiness? What are the cause of happiness? We are fundamentally mistaken about that. And that is the cause of our suffering. Now, clearly, anger. And there are a lot of emotions that go with anger. Impatience. I mean, impatience is a kind of anger. That's mine. I mean, I'm terribly impatient. Attachments are clinging to something, clinging to things that you think are the source of happiness. An example that Geshe uses is cheesecake, and I'm assuming they don't have cheesecake in Tibet, because when he came here, his thing was cheesecake and warm chocolate chip cookies from Whole Foods. And he's a diabetic patient now because of that. But so the point being, the way he describes it is, if you think that you eat a slice of cheesecake, this is delicious, and maybe a cup of coffee or milk or whatever you have with your cake, this is delicious, this is happiness, I am so happy right now. So you eat the whole cheesecake, and you get another cheesecake. Yeah, and you eat that cheesecake. I mean, how many cheesecakes will it take before you realize that cheesecake is not the source of happiness? Because the idea is, if cheesecake was the source of happiness, then the more cheesecake you eat, the happier you should be. I mean, that's, they use logic in these Buddhist universities, these Tibetan universities, these schools. They use logic and they debate. And and that's the kind of topic that they might use. Warm chocolate chip cookies from Whole Foods. Well, there are no warm chocolate chip cookies from Whole Foods in Kathmandu. So if they're going to go back to some continuing education credits in the universities in Asia, and there's no chocolate chip cookies from Whole Foods, then there's no happiness. If chocolate chip cookies are the source of happiness, if they make you happy, and then you can't get them, then there goes your happiness. So that's what this attachment. And pride, this goes to this sense of I, this goes to, we're going to talk about emptiness. In the Buddha unquestionably asserts that there is no I. There is no me, there's no mind. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit each night. The outline we get from FPMTs, we do it on the last night, but it's just for us to talk about that for an hour and a half, it's just going to be, it's just uncomfortable and not fun. So because it's such, Chris and I love talking about it. I mean, it's a great topic to discuss and speculate and so on. But the idea of no, it's in Sanskrit. It's Atman, which means soul. So in Buddhism, the assertion is that there is no soul. Ana Atman is the Sanskrit word. There's no soul. There's no I. The way the Buddha says we exist, or the way we experience life, is through our 5 aggregates. And those feelings, forms, compositional factors, mental functions, and meditation, consciousness. That's how we experience life. That's how what we are observing is experienced by. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please. I'll stand up here and I'll talk till it's time to go home if you don't ask questions.
So if there's no self or a soul or an identity, then what is it that is dying and being reborn over and over in samsara? and like the Dalai Lama is the reincarnation of the former Dalai Lama.
So there's a difference. Reincarnation is the essence of that being going into the next life, reincarnation. His Holiness and the Dalai Lamas before him were identified as children, as being the reincarnation of the prior Dalai Lama, and they were able to recognize tools such as rosaries and canes and buildings and so on. As they got older, the memory of that prior life faded. Rebirth is different. Rebirth is not that what you think is the essence of you going to the next life. It is your most subtle consciousness. So we have this gross consciousness that we see, that we're experiencing. We tactile, we touch things, we see, smell, taste. That's our grossest consciousness. Our senses are helping us experience what we're seeing. And then there's the subtle consciousness where maybe when you first wake up, when you've been sleeping and you first wake up, that just kind of grogginess. Most subtle consciousness we only access, they say, right as you're fainting. If you're stand up too fast and your blood pressure is not sufficient to keep blood to your brain, or sexual orgasm, they say that's briefly you access this. That subtle consciousness is what carries the karmic seeds that have been planted from these virtuous and non-virtuous actions through your body, speech, and mind. The question, if you're asking, what is it and how does this rebirth occur? The way I understand it, the way I've been taught, is that we are, as we sit here, we are changing minute by minute. Everything is changing minute by minute. Our compositional, our aggregates, the 5 aggregates that we are composed of, they're all changing all the time, moment by moment. So we're dying and being reborn moment by moment. This consciousness that they're describing has always existed and always will exist. Every consciousness, every moment of consciousness, this is the logic, this is how they come up with this. Every moment of consciousness is preceded by a prior moment of consciousness. So, I mean, you can think back to, what meals you had last week. You can think back to childhood memories. Most of people can think back to maybe 4 years old, 3, 4 years old. But every moment of consciousness, no matter what age we are, is preceded by another moment of consciousness. When the sperm and egg come together in our mom, that's not the beginning of our consciousness. That's the physical. That's the physical part of these 5 aggregates that they're talking about. That's the party line anyway. I mean, so it's difficult. It's difficult, and rebirth is one that I struggled with, and still, I mean, I can discuss it intellectually, and it's like I said, when I would volunteer to drive these visiting teachers, and when you take them home or bring them to class, you get an opportunity to ask questions, and that's one I always asked was, I'll keep reading it, and I'm just, I mean, Buddhism is a very experiential practice, so. And a lot of things that we examine during meditation, these teachings, analytical meditation, and examine what is true, what's not true, because it's only true for you. What's true for me may not be true for you, and vice versa. And consciousness is one, because everything else makes sense to me. Karma, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but you can't, the Buddhist assertion of how things exist does not work if you take one of these out. If you take rebirth out, then karma is irrelevant. So it's a logical, it's a logical argument, and I mean we're still debating it amongst ourselves. I mean that's the best answer I can give. I don't hope that's helpful. So this self that we're talking about that doesn't exist. So real quickly, another experiment or practice that we sometimes do on how to understand how the Buddha is asserting our existence is that we can dissect these 5 aggregates, because it seems like I'm in here experiencing you out there, and that's a dualistic expression. That's a dualistic view of the world. And what the Buddha is saying is that things don't exist that way. It is not dual. It is not two. It is not two. So if you're looking for where is this here that's experiencing, that thinks it's dual, that thinks that subject and object are different, that's maybe a better way of saying it. Where is it? So, I mean, it's not in my arms. I mean, it's not my legs. I mean, you would think, so some people say, well, is it, the mind? Well, I mean, that's a physical thing. consciousness is not physical. Consciousness is colorless, odorless, and not physical. So it can't be mind, is the logic. So where is it? Now you can get a sense of that. If you think of the last time you were angry, that's when you get this sense of, this, because that's what's rising up, that thinks it has to defend itself from some insult or some transgression. That when that anger rises up, that's probably your greatest sense that there's a me. Now you exist conventionally. I mean, I'm saying, because see, that was the nihilism. That goes back to the Chittamatra version of things only exist in, if there's a consciousness observing them. That's nihilism. So we're not saying that. But he is saying that there's not an I there that we think there is. And so that's the Madhyamaka. That's the middle school. It doesn't exist the way it seems like we do. And, we do exist. There's not a nihilistic assertion. So I can get hung up on some of that. So wrong view is that view of things existing the way they seem to be. That's what wrong view is. And you'll see this in the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. Is the Eightfold Path, and we're going to talk about some of these. I want to get to this chart. So the truth of sensation. Now we're getting to the good part. There is a cessation of suffering, and the cessation is this right view, is this understanding of how things exist. This seeing samsara, having this understanding of cyclic existence, having this understanding that things that seem to cause us happiness can also cause suffering. They do cause suffering. These things that we become attached to because we think that they're the source of happiness, they are not the source of happiness. They're going to disappoint us. They're going to degrade. They're going to go bad. They're going to fall apart. This is true about everything that is, what the term is compounded phenomena, everything that is made from parts, everything that exists because of what prior causes and conditions. Everything that exists because of prior causes and conditions will cause us pain, will cause us to suffer. We will mistakenly believe that that's the source of our happiness. We will attach to them, we will cling to them, we will grab onto them, and then they are going to disappoint us. And this is true about everything that is impermanent. Now some people are going to struggle with this because you think about, let's just take the word attachment literally. What are you attached to? I know anybody have a child? Children, a spouse, mom and dad? There are things, there may be material things you're attached to as well. But, that's the deliciousness of samsara. And that spouse, that child, that romantic relationship is impermanent. It's going to grow old, get sick, and die. Now the antidote to that, to help y'all, because that's a really morbid, that's a really sad, is an appreciation. So if you think about when you're with your friends, when you're with your family, when you're with people that you love, and love in Buddhism means that you want that person to be happy. It's not, I'm in love with that person because they make me happy. I'm in love with that person because they fulfill my needs. That's what most romantic relationships are about. That's what most romantic relationships are about. That person makes me feel good, and so I love them. In Buddhism, love is wanting that person to be happy, even if it's to leave them. If they're going to be happy, the only way they can be happy is to leave you. You should be happy they're happy. It's a tall order. So when you're with people that you love, focus on what it is that you admire about that person. Ignore the things about them that annoy you. And ignore the things about them that you aren't attracted to. I mean, now this is a person, I'm not talking about somebody, I'm not talking about a boyfriend or girlfriend that comes home and steals all your stuff and runs off with your best friend. I mean, that's not, that's not a love that's returned. But this love that you feel for somebody that is returned, that's who I'm talking about. Appreciate what it is about that person that you admire, because it's likely that that is not going to last. I mean, one of you is going to die first. Because we're all samsara. Birth, old age, sickness, and death. So it's going to happen. And if you appreciate that person that's returning your love now, when they are gone, that's what you want to focus on, is that appreciation. And try to recall that appreciation. When we are born, it's like getting thrown out of an airplane without a parachute. Every heartbeat takes you closer to death. So that's, I'm going to talk about this so much, y'all going to get tired. Y'all going to be happy when I switch to death and impermanence. You're going to be like, gracious, we're off of this suffering, and now we're on dead people and impermanence. But that's what we're talking about, is the cause of this suffering is our attachment, our misconception, and our misunderstanding of what our happiness is. And the truth of that sensation is understanding our misconception about what makes us happy. The fourth one, this truth of the path is the sensation of suffering. This is the Eightfold Path. And this is, I hope I put this slide in there. The Eightfold Path. And the Buddhists like lists. There's 4 of these and 8 of those and 2 of these and 3s. And I could probably then 16, Jim, 16 guidelines. So we got lots of lists. But I mean, somebody like me, I'm kind of OCD. I kind of learned that way. I like to make lists, and I have lists of lists. So I'm right at home with some of this stuff. Truth of the path, cessation of suffering is the Eightfold Path. It's also the 3 principal aspects of the path that Lama Tsongkhapa came up with. So how do you relate to these truths? So the suffering. So the way the Buddha described this, the first truth of suffering, it should be understood. It should be acknowledged. We understand what it is. And we gave some examples. Suffering of suffering, all pervasive suffering. The cause, this we should abandon. And this is kind of medieval language. I mean, these are literal translations, and so I mean, I don't apologize for that, but this is the way that medieval language ends up when it's translated. So the causes should be abandoned. The truth of the suffering, we should understand it. We should recognize it. We should know what it is. Should meditate on it. I mean, it's not hard to accept. And then the causes of that suffering should be abandoned. The truth of sensation, we should realize what these truths are. The clinging, the attachment, the delusion of the causes of happiness. The Eightfold Path. Number 4. So the Eightfold Path is what we do here. It's what we do in this room. There's a class here almost every day. We have meditations on Saturday. We have teachings about the Geshis, one of the Geshis on Sunday. We have these advanced class on Monday night. We have these beginner classes on Tuesday nights. We have Geshis comes in here on Wednesday night. Every day there's a teaching in this room that will fall under this truth of the path of the suffering. The Eightfold Path should be developed. And before I go to the Eightfold Path, let me say these can be divided again. So the first 2 we don't want, and the second 2, the third and fourth one, we do want. Chris, you don't like that? You don't like that description? Okay, thank you. So I noticed this description some time ago, and fortunately I cut and pasted it and was able to find it on my hard drive. So in the first noble truth, and that's one of the reasons I wanted y'all to have this handout so you could understand this slide. So in the first noble truth, all that we need to do is just understand it. And once you understand what the truth of suffering, once you know what that is, you don't have to go back to it. Once you know what it is, Ian, did you have a question? Once you know what it is, you don't have to go back to it. Number two, the truth of the sensation of sensation. Once you know what that is, once that is realized, you will never go back to non-realization. Now realization is a significant word. I mean, that's just not like, okay, I get it, I understand it. Now this is a significant understanding. This is a significant acceptance of the cause of suffering. If you can realize the causes of your suffering, you will not have to go back to not realizing them. This sounds like, why do you even have to point that out? Number three, the truth, the sensation of suffering. If this is described as enlightened. Once you know what the truth of cessation of suffering, what will cause you to stop suffering. Once you realize that, you'll never go back to non-cessation. That's not really a word. Spell check didn't like that at all. I actually separated it because it kept doing those red squiggly lines under it. But so that's enlightenment. That's if you get to number three and you have that realization, you are enlightened. Number 8 is the Eightfold Path. Once you develop a personal experience with the Eightfold Path, there's nothing else to do. So, when you think about how broad the Buddhist teachings are and how esoteric these teachings can be, if you come to school here, I've been coming to school here for 5 years, it's comforting to see it simplified. I really enjoy putting these slides together. Okay, this is the Eightfold Path. Now, this is the literal translation, but you could, and I probably can bring a handout next week or make one on what these are. You could substitute the right view, all these right. You could substitute wise. I think that's more descriptive because, like speech, these are ethics and morals. These are all common sense kind of things. But when you think of right speech, this is not just lying. I mean, this is gossip. Somebody tell you something that somebody else said, and you repeat it. That's not wise speech. Divisive. You go tell Jim something that Chris said. That's not wise. I mean, somebody make a careless comment. I mean, friends, Steve, that shirt makes you look fat. I mean. So it's much more broad than that. And these like right livelihood, this is like having employment that harms people. Seems like I made myself. I skipped right over something, David. Oh, I know what I did. I divided them up. So the first two is wisdom. These first two is wisdom. 3, 4, and 5 are ethical conduct. And then effort, mindlessness, and concentration are mental disciplines. And I know I had some. So right speech is like, lies, backbiting, slander, talk that may bring about hatred.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, dear.
Could you go back so the 4, 5, 6 are ethical conduct?
Oh, yeah. Mental discipline.
Okay, what's mental discipline?
6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8. Okay.
So, I mean, rude speech, harsh speech, foolish babble, gossip. So this right action is promoting moral, honorable, and peaceful conduct. We should abstain from killing, stealing, dishonest dealings. Sexual misconduct is coming under right action. Sexual misconduct is using sex harmfully. It's not, doesn't have anything to do with sexual orientation. It doesn't have anything to do with race, or it's all about misusing sex, using sex in a way to harm someone, using sex to manipulate someone. And of course, the livelihood we talked about, that's the kind of employment that you would have. The right effort, it's to prevent evil, unwholesome states of mind from arising. I don't have a good explanation for that. But if you Google Eightfold Path, there are numerous descriptions. They give better understandings for what these are. The 3 principal aspects of the path that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote, that is also included in this Truth of the Path, is renunciation, and that's renouncing attachments to things that you think that are causing you happiness, that are actually causing you suffering. Bodhicitta, the second one, is the wish to obtain enlightenment to benefit all other beings. And then the third one is the wisdom of emptiness. The word is usually just says wisdom. Anytime you see wisdom, that's usually what they're, in Buddhism, that's usually what they're talking about, is the wisdom realizing emptiness. And again, that's this idea of how things exist. Now, it seems to me that we can reduce this to even one other easier thing to remember. Buddhism is it's like a two-winged, it's like a bird needs 2 wings to fly. In Buddhism, it is 1/2 compassion, 1 part compassion, and then there's 1 part wisdom. And when you see, so there are mudras, you see mudras are hand signs, hand languages, and you'll see different ones. This is a teaching. This is Lama Atisha with the red hat. That was a historical figure. This is not a personification, but that mudra he's doing is teaching. And so you'll see you'll see it in Asian countries. Often you'll see these 2 hands together in a prayer. We have prayers in Buddhism. We have prayers in Buddhism. So we have these gold prayer books. I'm going to go over one night. But these are aspirations. These are wishes. These are not prayers that we were asking for someone to save us or give us something. But anyway, so this mudra with 2 hands put together, this is wisdom and compassion. And then when we put them together, and you'll see often, if you see Buddhists, you'll see their thumbs tucked in between them. It's because you don't offer anything empty. So when you see this, and you see us, if you come here on Sundays, you see a lot of prostrations, you'll see a lot of bowing, and this divinity in me, recognizing and acknowledging the divinity of you, and we're offering you wisdom and compassion, and it's kind of like this wish-fulfilling jewel. I mean, because this knowledge that the Buddha is imparting on us is, as Geshe-la talked about this on Sunday, is more valuable than that wish-fulfilling jewel. This jewel, I mean, there's no such thing, of course, but the idea is that you could have a jewel that would answer all your wishes, is not as valuable as having this understanding and having this experience of enlightenment. Yes, sir.
Where does let's see, greed, hatred, and delusion, where does that fit into all this?
How do you mean?
I don't know if I read it somewhere or I heard it, but I thought
it's true. Yeah,
I thought the Buddha said the cause of all suffering is greed, hatred, and delusion.
Well, the delusion. Well, absolutely. Well, so so we're hijacked by our emotions. That's what he's saying. This greed and anger. These are emotions that take over. We're hijacked by them. The delusions, of course, is that misunderstanding of what is the cause of happiness and what's causing our suffering. so the way to think about these emotions that are hijacking us is through, when we were cavemen, these emotions were necessary, where they were useful. Fear. I mean, if the people in the next cave tried to steal the food that you had for your family, I mean, that anger would serve a purpose in that. It's going to dump adrenaline, and you're going to rise up and be big enough and be strong enough and be capable enough to defend your family. And it's, walking down some path in the jungle or the wilderness or something, and some beast is going to attack your family. I mean, that it served a benefit. We've evolved, but we still have those emotions. They don't serve a purpose in modern life, even at the time of the Buddha. I'm talking about 10,000 years ago, we had these emotions. 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. And our delusions, our misunderstanding of how things exist, because again, we're not going to have to fight off a lion on a wilderness path, so we don't need that anger. But that sense of self, that sense of preservation that rises up in a caveman to fight this saber-toothed tiger is still here. I mean, so when we evolved, those emotions are still with us. We left some of the other things, like maybe big arms and the muscles that you would have had at that time. I know that's a rambling explanation, but we're hijacked by those. And what the Buddha is saying is they are not real. They're not emotions. This anger, greed, jealousy. They're not based on reality. If every one of us was a bodhisattva, we would all be living to benefit everyone else. That's the idea. So there would be no need for greed, because I would give you anything you need. Now, I mean, it's a conventional world we live in, so I can't get my car and go downtown Raleigh and pick up all the homeless people and bring them home. I mean, it's just not wise. It's just not helpful. It's just not useful. But the idea is that if we all had obtained enlightenment, we had all attained bodhicitta, we were all bodhisattvas, then all the world's problems would exist. I mean, the whole reason we have all these conflicts on the world stage is we have this false sense of I. Without that false sense of I, all these nations that are arguing and fighting over the issues today, trade and so on, they would all be resolved, because we would go to the nth degree to help everyone that needs, fulfill those needs. I mean, sometimes there's just no really short answers, and so I sometimes don't know how to answer it other than to make these long stories. Other questions, because that's how I learn, is from questions. Because people ask me stuff all the time that I don't know, and I've got to go ask Geshe or to look it up. So I want to tell one quick. Yes, good.
Okay. For the Eightfold Path, do you when you're learning these? Do you go 1 through 8, or are they taught at different, or you can learn them all at once?
Oh, I mean, it's all very common sense. It's not nothing mystical. Whatever's convenient for you.
Okay.
Whatever's convenient for you. One of my textbooks has this chart, and I don't know that this is going to be helpful to you guys, but I'll probably put it up again next time. So this truth of suffering, when we made all these lists, is dukkha. So there's one. How do you spell disease, Jim? D-I. Disease. Chris.
D.
How do y'all pronounce that? Anybody? Kate? Yeah. So Geshe get it. And I'm going to tell this story. He tells it, so I'm not telling him. Jesus. English is not his first language. He still speaks Tibetan when I think he's speaking English. Jesus. So he's on the diocese. He's on stage with Professor Robert Thurman. I was his driver when he was here last time, about 3 years ago. Robert Thurman's this famous Buddhist monk. He's now the Indo-Tibetan chair at Columbia University, but he was the first Westerner to earn the Geshe degree. He went to the monastery with His Holiness in Tibet. I can't remember if the Communist Chinese were there at that time or not. But he took his robes off, and now he's a professor. And but he teaches, and he's a good friend of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness asked him to open he opened the Tibet House in New York City. Richard Gere is the co-founder. His daughter is Oma Thurman. And Google Om. It's a Tibetan word. It's the meaning is interesting. But anyway, Geshe-la and Robert Thurman are on the diocese, and they're talking to this group of visitors, and they're teaching this. I don't remember what topic it was, but Geshe-la was saying, Jesus, Jesus, this. You can talk about the Four Noble Truths, Jesus, that. And Professor Thurman was looking, making this shocked expression on his face, and Geshe-la would say, Jesus. And Robert Thurman was looking at. So at the end of the speech, Geshe-la asked him and said, "Well, why were you looking at me so funny?" And he's like, "Well, why were you saying come to Jesus?" That was hilarious. I mean, he's a lot of fun. When so I do some things for Geshe-la. I was taking him to Greensboro to visit a temple there, and we were having lunch at his house, and and it looks like a Tibetan place. So, but he we had mumu. I don't know if you've had those, Hitty. And he set a big bowl of steaming, John Paul cooked, big bowl of steaming mumu and this hot sauce and soup. This wonderful soup. But he sets, John Paul sets all the bowls on the table, and there's plates, and there's no silverware. And so Geshe-la gets up, and he brings over some silverware, and he hands out some silverware, and he says, "We usually eat with our feet." I was like, what? And but he meant to say, our hands. Well, 5 minutes earlier, we were going to do some volunteer work at this Vietnamese temple in Greensboro, and he was saying Vietnamese. I was hearing wilderness people, and there's this Cambodian or Thai tradition. It's the forest people. Chris, do y'all know that, Jim? That's the Buddhist school is called the forest. And I thought that is what he was talking about. I mean, so I kept hearing wilderness people. And I finally said, Geshe-la, are you saying wilderness people? And he just laughed. And he said, Vietnamese people. So when we got in the car, so we had lunch and then the next week I was going to pick him up and drive him to Greensboro, and we were going to do this thing. And so when he got in my car, he said, we're going to teach the wilderness people how not to eat with their feet. We have a lot of fun here. You're very welcome. The tradition here in Tibetan Buddhism is to reset a motivation at the beginning of the class, an intent. You people could have been any number of places instead of coming here, so you were motivated to come here and have this experience. The other part of this tradition is to dedicate at the end of a teaching. So whatever merit, whatever benefit that was acquired here, I'd like for you to join me in dedicating this time we spent together to the benefit of all those people that are suffering, and that we intend to become better people to benefit others. Thank you, and I will see you next Tuesday if you care to join us again. You were great. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Any questions? I'm going to take us a minute to take all this stuff apart. My email is, I'm not sure. Is steve@kadampacenter.org. So I'm going to try, like I said, try to end class every night on time so that people aren't embarrassed if they have to get up because they have a babysitter or they have someplace to be. This practice is all about asking questions. This practice is all about being skeptical. It's important that you're skeptical. It's important that you question this. It's important if this is going to be a meaningful endeavor that you examine what you are taught here and see if it's true. And so for homework, I would like for you to try to think of something that does not exist without prior causes and conditions. A partless particle. Because the Buddha is saying that there is nothing. Let me say this. What the Buddha is saying is that the reality we experience is based on phenomena that is compounded, that is made of parts, that exist because of prior causes and conditions. So let me phrase it this way. Try to think of something that does not exist because of a prior cause and condition. Chris and I were talking one time, we thought, well, maybe it's space between particles. But anyway. Questions? Yes, Helen. Oh, micro. Well, we're the class. Chris has probably shut us down.
So you were saying every time, every birth comes from a previous kind of subconsciousness transfer.
Yes.
How do you coil that or put it together with the, from an engineering standpoint,
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Raise in population around the world. So if you have,
It's fixed number.
so that's the only logic I thought.
That's right. That's right. That's what it's fixed number.
So there's a fixed.
So what that means is because we're recycled over and over and over, we've all been each other's mother. That's right. That's right. And the reason and we're going to talk about that in some of these other classes, the reason that's important is because that's a consideration that you should make when you meet people. That person in another life was my mother. And think about how much your mother cared for you. Think about how much your mother meant to you, what she taught you, she cared for you, she fed you, taught you everything at school, Motherless sentient being, all mother sentient beings is the prayer. Benefit all mother sentient beings. That's the party line anyway. Okay, I enjoyed this. Thank you for coming. This is part of my practice and you've helped me. Thanks for coming.